Man, I hadn't slept in what felt like a week. We'd just gotten this new lab puppy, a little chocolate thing named Moose, and you'd think for being so small he wouldn't be able to make a sound that could pierce through concrete. But you'd be wrong. 3 straight nights of that high-pitched, desperate yelping, and I was shot. My wife, bless her, could sleep through a hurricane, but I was starting to see things in the corners of my eyes. I couldn't even think straight. So I finally just gave up. I told her, I'm sleeping in the horse trailer. I don't care if it's 30 degrees out, I just need quiet. We've got this old 2-horse gooseneck parked behind the barn, the kind with a little sleeping compartment up front where you keep the tack and saddles. It's not fancy, just a mattress pad on the floor and the smell of old leather and horse feed, but to me, it was the Ritz-Carlton. I just grabbed my heaviest sleeping bag, a pillow, and trudged out there, dead to the world before my head even hit the pillow. The silence was just total, blissful. I woke up slow, the kind of wake up where you're not really sure if you're dreaming. The light coming through the little half-moon window in the trailer door was that pale, gray color of a spring morning, just before the sun really gets going. It was dead quiet, except for one of the horses, probably our old mare Bess, shifting her weight in the barn nearby. And then I heard it, a loud bang. It wasn't a gunshot, not sharp enough. It was more of a deep, hollow thud, like someone dropped a heavy log or something slammed against the side of the barn. On any other day, I would have been up and out there in a second, checking on the animals. But I was so groggy, so deep in that fog of sleep deprivation, my first thought was just, damn branch probably fell. The snow was starting to melt, and the ground was getting soft. It made sense. I pulled the sleeping bag up over my ears, trying to sink back into the warmth and the quiet, desperate for just one more hour of peace before the farm chores and that damn puppy started up again for the day. About 30 minutes later, maybe less, I was hovering in that space right between sleep and waking when it happened. The doorknob. It wasn't a gentle turn. It was a sudden, violent rattle that shook the whole damn door in its frame. Jank. A hard, brutal shake, like someone was putting their whole body weight into it, testing to see if it would just pop open. My eyes flew wide open. I wasn't groggy anymore. My heart went from 0 to 100 in a split second, just hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it was going to make a noise. I've never felt a fear like that. It was pure, ice-cold adrenaline. I didn't move a muscle. I just shrunk down inside my sleeping bag, trying to make myself as small as possible, like a little kid hiding from a monster. The metal handle rattled again, a furious, frustrated slam of metal against metal. It was so close, just inches from my head. I could hear the person's grunts of effort on the other side. This wasn't an accident. This was someone trying to get in. Then silence. The rattling stopped as suddenly as it began. I swear, the only sound in the whole world was the blood roaring in my ears and my own ragged breathing, which I was trying my best to hold back so I wouldn't make a sound. Every nerve in my body was on fire. I lay there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. I was just waiting for the window to shatter, or for the door to splinter inward. But it never came. Instead, I heard footsteps. Not running, just walking. A heavy, steady crunching in the half-melted, crusty snow. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound was moving away from the trailer, heading away from the barn. The sheer calm of it was almost worse than the violent shaking. They weren't panicked. They weren't scurrying away. They were just leaving. I stayed put, paralyzed, listening until the sound faded completely, swallowed up by the morning quiet. The only thing that saved me, the only reason I wasn't face to face with whoever that was the small slide bolt on the inside of the door. That flimsy piece of cheap metal was the only thing. It took me another 20 minutes to work up the nerve to move. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely unzip the sleeping bag. I crawled over to the small window on the door, my whole body trembling, and peeked out. Nothing. Just the side of the barn, the big oak tree, the gray morning sky. I finally reached up, my fingers fumbling with the bolt, and slowly, quietly pulled the door open. The cold air hit my face, and it felt like a slap. I stepped out onto the metal running board, scanning the whole yard, my eyes darting everywhere. And that's when I saw them. The footprints. There was a single set of tracks, pressed deep into the slushy, refreezing snow. They were clear as day. Big, heavy boot prints. But the thing that made all the blood drain from my face, the thing that I can't get out of my head, was where they came from. They didn't come from the driveway, or from our house. They came from the direction of the main road, a straight line cut across the pasture, leading directly, and I mean directly, to the door of the horse trailer I was sleeping in. There was no wandering, no checking the house or the barn doors. Whoever it was, they walked from the road, a good quarter-mile away, through the dark and the cold, with a singular purpose. They came straight to my little metal box and tried to get in. The tracks led to the door, then turned around, and walked in a straight line right back to the road and disappeared. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some random thief checking for unlocked doors. They knew, or they thought they knew. They knew someone or something was in that trailer. I stood there, shivering in the cold, staring at those empty impressions in the snow. My safe place, my quiet refuge on my own land, was gone. That feeling of security was just an illusion. Someone had walked onto my property, past my house, past my animals, and put their hands on the very door I was sleeping behind, and I have no earthly idea who it was or why. And I'm not sure I'll ever feel safe here again. It was one of those perfect, lazy California summer days, the kind that feels like it's been baked in an oven on low for about 10 hours. I was 16, and my world was basically my beat-up headphones, a worn-out bikini, and the patch of front lawn that got the best sun. Our house is this big, old Victorian thing, kinda spooky looking if you're not used to it, set way back from the main road in a rural part of the state. It felt like my own little kingdom. I was laying out on a towel, the heat just soaking into my skin, listening to some indie band that I was sure was like the most profound thing in the world. The air was thick with the smell of dry grass and the buzz of insects, and for a while, everything was completely still. That's when I first noticed it. A nondescript, kind of faded green four-door sedan. It just rolled past, real slow, way slower than anyone ever drives on our road. I didn't think much of it, probably just some lost tourist looking for the wineries. I closed my eyes again, sinking back into the warmth and the music, completely oblivious. But then, the sound of the engine didn't fade away. It just hung in the air. I cracked an eye open and looked toward the road. The car was there, stopped. It had pulled over to the shoulder on the other side, perfectly positioned, so the driver's side was facing our house, facing me. The windows were tinted so dark you couldn't see a thing inside, just your own reflection warped in the glass. It was like a void, but I could feel it. I swear to God, I could feel someone's eyes on me. It wasn't like a normal look, it was this heavy, pressing sensation, like a physical weight. It felt like heat, a different kind of heat than the sun, a focused beam that made the little hairs on my arms stand up. The music in my ears suddenly felt stupid and loud, so I pulled the buds out. The silence that rushed in was even worse, broken only by the low, steady idle of that car's engine. My brain was trying to find a logical reason. Car trouble, they're on the phone, they're waiting for someone. But my gut, man, my gut was screaming at me that this was wrong. This was something else entirely. For what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or two, we were locked in this weird standoff. Me frozen on my towel, trying to look casual, and the silent green car just watching. I thought about getting up and running inside, but I was paralyzed by this bizarre need to not seem scared, to not give them the satisfaction. Like if I just ignored it, it would go away. Then the creepiest thing happened. The car's reverse lights blinked on. It didn't pull away and continued down the road like a lost person would. It started backing up, slowly, deliberately, its tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. My heart was a drum against my ribs. It backed up until it was directly across from our driveway, and then in one smooth, unhurried motion, it turned and pulled right into my driveway. The sound of the tires on our gravel was a violation, an invasion. It parked right behind my mom's minivan. The engine cut out, and the silence that followed was the loudest, most terrifying thing I've ever heard in my life. I was trapped. He was between me and the road, and the front door felt a million miles away. The driver's side door clicked open. The sound was so sharp in the dead air. I held my breath, watching. A man got out. He wasn't some monster from a horror movie. That would have almost been less scary. He was aggressively normal. Maybe in his 30s, with a soft paunch sticking out from under a faded band t-shirt, a beer belly. He had on some regular-ass jeans and work boots. He looked like any dad you'd see at a hardware store on a Saturday. He shut the car door with a solid, final-sounding thump. He didn't even look at me at first. He just stood there for a second, stretching his back like he'd been on a long drive, and glanced around the property. He looked at my dad's old pickup truck, at the tools leaning against the garage, at the wraparound porch of the house. He was cataloging things, taking inventory. His movements were so casual, so calm. It was the complete lack of nervousness that terrified me. He was acting like he belonged there, like he was just stopping by his own place. He finally turned and started walking, not towards the front door to knock, but directly towards the little picket fence gate that separates the driveway from the front lawn where I was laying. My whole body went rigid. The gate wasn't even properly latched. We just used a stretched out, faded red bungee cord hooked around the post to keep it shut from the wind. It was a joke of a lock, a suggestion of a boundary. He walked right up to it and stopped. He didn't try to open it. He just examined it. He reached out a hand, a normal-looking hand with dirt under the fingernails, and he put his thumb on the bungee cord. He pressed it, testing the tension. He pulled it away from the post an inch, let it snap back. He was assessing it. He was checking my defenses, and he was doing it right in front of me. It was so brazen, so unbelievably bold. After a moment, he dropped his hand, and his eyes flicked over to me, just for a second. There was nothing in them. No anger, no emotion. Just a flat, dead, calculating look. An appraisal. And then, just like that, he was done. He turned around without a word, his boots crunching on the gravel again, and walked back to his car. He got in, started the engine, backed out of our driveway as calmly as he'd pulled in, and just drove away down the road, leaving a small cloud of dust hanging in the air. I stayed there, laying on my towel, for I don't know how long. I was shaking, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my stomach and spread through my whole body. The sun felt cold now. The quiet of the countryside wasn't peaceful anymore. It was full of menace. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't even spoken to me. But what he did was worse. He showed me how easily he could get to me. He showed me that my gate was worthless, that my home wasn't a fortress, that I was completely exposed. It was a primal kind of fear, a bone-deep, animal understanding that I had just been scouted by a predator. He wasn't just lost. He was learning the layout. And the chilling, unspoken promise that hung in the air was that he knew now, and he could come back whenever he wanted. My story, this thing that still messes me up, it all went down in this little rural village way out in the south of France. We'd moved there for the quiet life, you know? The whole deal, an old stone house, a big garden, and fields for miles. The guy who owned pretty much all that surrounding land was our only real neighbor. At first, it was fine. He was just this fixture, this guy you'd see in the distance, walking the edge of the woods or driving his beat-up tractor along the property line. We'd give a little wave, he'd nod back. It was part of the landscape. But there was always something a little off about him. The way he'd stop and just stare at our house for a minute too long before moving on. We brushed it off as him being a country guy, protective of his land, maybe just curious about the new American family who'd moved in. We told ourselves it was nothing, that we were just city folks not used to the way things were out here. But deep down, there was this little alarm bell, a quiet one, but it was ringing. It was the kind of feeling you get when you think someone's behind you, but you turn around and there's no one there. That little alarm bell started screaming one afternoon. I was in the kitchen, just doing my thing, chopping up some carrots for dinner. The house was quiet, sun was coming in through the window over the sink, one of those peaceful, lazy days. I was totally in my own world, just the rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the knife on the cutting board. Then I felt it, that feeling of being watched again, but 1,000 times stronger. It was so intense it made the hair on my arms stand up. I looked up from the carrots, straight at the window, and I swear my heart just stopped. His head was just there, filling the pane of glass. He wasn't standing up, looking in. No, he was crouched down low in the flower bed right outside, like he'd been hiding there, waiting. His face was pressed right up near the glass, eyes wide and completely blank, just staring at me. There was no expression, no smile, no hello. Just this dead, vacant watching. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity, and then he just slowly straightened up and walked away, disappearing into the trees like it never happened. I just stood there, knife in my hand, my whole body shaking. It wasn't just that he was there. It was the fact that he'd been crouching, hiding, waiting for God knows how long. A few months went by after the window thing, and I tried to push it down. You know how you do, you try to rationalize it. He's weird, he's lonely, whatever. Life went on. Around that time, I started sleeping out in this old trailer we had parked in the garden. It was my little escape, my own space away from the family. It felt like freedom at first. But soon, that feeling of being watched came back, and it was worse out there. The trailer walls were so thin, you could hear every little thing, every twig that snapped in the woods, every rustle in the bushes. I'd lie there in the dark, my ears straining, convinced I could hear footsteps just circling the trailer, slow and deliberate. I started pulling the curtains tight, stuffing a blanket against the bottom of the door. I was jumpy all the time. I'd see a shape in the dark and my blood would run cold, but it would just be a tree or a shadow. I was living on this constant edge of paranoia, feeling like I was in a fishbowl. The open fields I used to love now felt exposed, and the woods that bordered our property felt like they were full of eyes. I was a prisoner in my own yard, and the scariest part was I had no proof. It was just a feeling, a creeping dread that was slowly eating away at my sanity. The breaking point, the moment this went from creepy to full-blown horror movie, happened one morning right at dawn. I was fast asleep in the trailer. My stepdad, he's an early riser, always up with the sun. He was in his bedroom, which has a window that looks right out over the garden and the trailer. He went to open his blinds, just like he did every single morning, to let the first light in. And then he saw him, the neighbor. He wasn't in the distance, he wasn't on the edge of the property. He was standing right there, literally inches from my trailer window. And he was bent over, hunched down, peering through the small gap in my curtains, just watching me sleep. My stepdad said he was as still as a stone statue, just this dark silhouette against the rising sun, completely fixated. The image he described to me later, it makes me sick to my stomach to even think about it. This man had been standing there, in the cold morning air, just staring at me while I was completely vulnerable and unaware. The violation of it, the absolute predatory stillness of it, my stepdad said he saw red. He didn't even think, he just reacted. All that quiet anger my stepdad had been feeling just exploded. He didn't yell from the window. He ripped on a pair of boots, grabbed the old shotgun he kept for varmints, and stormed out the back door. He said the guy didn't even hear him coming until he was right on top of him. He just screamed, "Get the hell off my property now." The neighbor snapped up, his face pure shock, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He didn't say a word, just turned and scrambled away, crashing through the bushes and running back towards his land like the devil himself was after him. My stepdad stood there, shaking with rage, and yelled after him, "If I ever see you on this land again, I won't hesitate. I'll shoot you where you stand." Later that day, we heard from others in the village. The neighbor had lost it, telling people he was going to burn himself alive and take the whole damn village with him. That's when we found out his own father had tried to do the exact same thing years before. He hadn't just been a creep, he was dangerously unhinged, a powder keg waiting for a match. He never came back on our property after that, but it didn't matter. The damage was done, and it was permanent. That feeling of safety you're supposed to have in your own home, in your own backyard, it was gone, completely destroyed. I used to love walking through those fields at night, under the stars, feeling that sense of peace and endless space. I can't do that anymore. Now, every time I look out into the darkness, I don't see peace. I see 1,000 places a person could hide. Every shadow looks like a man crouching. Every sound the wind makes in the trees is the sound of footsteps. The real horror of it all sunk in later. It wasn't just the window incident or the morning at the trailer. The real horror was the question that will haunt me for the rest of my life. How many other times was he there? How many nights did he stand outside my trailer or crouch beneath my kitchen window in the pitch black, just watching me, and I never even knew? That's the part that gets you. The threat you can't see is the one that never really goes away. It just moves inside your head and lives there forever. Man, it all started on one of those lazy, hazy Thursdays where the air is thick and you got zero ambition. We were all just kind of sprawled out in Sarah's living room, a little high. You know how it is, just floating. It was me, my boy Leo, and the girls, Sarah and Chloe. Someone, probably Chloe, gets this bright idea. Let's go to the old quarry trails. Get some air. Sounded good to us. It's this place way out past the suburbs, a spot nobody really goes to unless they're trying to get away from everything, which was exactly our vibe. So we piled into my beat-up Civic, the windows down, music kinda humming low, and just drove. The whole ride out there was chill, full of that easy, stupid laughter that only happens when you're with your best people and you don't have a damn care in the world. We got to the dirt lot, empty except for one rusted-out pickup truck that looked like it had been there since the 80s. The air was fresh, smelled like pine and damp earth. We were just 4 friends, about to take a walk in the woods. We figured we'd find the lake, smoke the rest of what we had, and just be simple. God, I wish it had stayed simple. We hadn't even been on the trail for 5 minutes when things started feeling off. Like the whole vibe of the day just shifted, you know? We saw these 2 women walking towards us, coming from deeper in the woods. They were moving fast, almost stumbling over the roots on the path. What got me first were their hands. Their fingernails were super long and packed with dirt, like black caked on mud, like they'd been digging with their bare hands. Their faces were all tight and twitchy, and they were avoiding our eyes like we had the plague. Sarah gave them a little "hey," just being friendly, and they flinched, literally jumped, and scurried past us without a word. It was weird, but we kinda laughed it off. "Guess they're not friendly," Leo muttered. But the feeling stuck with me. Then, maybe 100 yards later, we saw them. 3 dudes. They weren't walking, they weren't sitting on a log, they weren't doing anything. They were just standing there, perfectly still, forming this weird-ass triangle, and all 3 of them were just staring down at this one spot on the ground, a hole or something. We had to walk right past them. We all said hi, tried to be normal, but they didn't even blink. Didn't move a muscle. They just stood there, staring at the dirt, completely ignoring us like we were ghosts. The silence was deafening. The air got cold, man. We kept walking, trying to shake it off, trying to get back to that lazy, stoned feeling, but it was gone. The woods didn't feel peaceful anymore. Every shadow seemed a little too deep. Every snap of a twig made us jump. We finally made it to the lake at the end of the trail, and for a minute, seeing the water, we started to relax a little. We sat down by the muddy bank, and Leo started messing around, poking a stick into the soft ground. That's when he hit something. It made this dull thunk sound. He dug around it with the stick in his hands, and he pulled out an axe. And man, this is the part that still messes with my head. The axe was clean, like spotless, but it was buried almost a foot deep in the mud. Who buries a clean axe? While we were all just staring at it, Chloe spotted something else a few feet away, an empty can of acetone. My brain started connecting dots I didn't want to connect. Acetone, a solvent for cleaning things. Then Sarah saw it, the thing that broke us. Half buried in the same mud was a Ziploc bag, the thick freezer kind. It was sealed tight, and it was full of blood. Dark, thick, real as hell blood. And written on the bag in black marker was one word. #9. We just stared. The whole world just stopped. That's when the fear turned into something else. It was pure lizard brain panic. Nobody had to say anything. We were all on our feet, grabbing our stuff, and we were running. Not jogging, but a full-on, desperate sprint back the way we came. My heart was a drum against my ribs, and all I could hear was the sound of our feet pounding the trail and our own ragged breathing. We passed the spot where the 3 men had been standing in their creepy triangle. They were gone. For a split second, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe they were just weirdos. Maybe we just let our high imaginations get the best of us. But then I heard it. A new sound. A heavy, crashing sound coming through the woods behind us, getting closer. I risked a look over my shoulder, and I saw him. One of the men. He was busting through the trees, off the path running. He wasn't jogging, he was frantic, his face covered in sweat, his eyes wide and wild. He was coming for us. The woods we'd walked into an hour ago feeling so free and peaceful now felt like a cage, and the walls were closing in fast. He was gaining on us. We burst out of the tree line and into the dirt parking lot, gasping for air, our legs burning. My car was right there. Safety. We were almost there. But the relief died in my throat. The other 2 men were there. They were leaning against my car, one on the driver's side door, one on the hood, like they owned it. They had been waiting for us. They were looking in the windows, just casually peering inside, like they were thinking of buying it. Leo, who's usually the calm one, just yelled, "What the hell, man? Get off the car." The one on the hood turned to look at us, and he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was slow, predatory, and it didn't touch his eyes. He looked right at Sarah and Chloe and said something so vile, something about what they were going to do to the girls, that something in me and Leo just snapped. All the fear, all the adrenaline, it just turned to pure rage. Before I even knew what I was doing, I lunged forward and threw a punch that connected with his jaw with a sick crack. At the same time, Leo grabbed the other guy and slammed him against the side of the car. It wasn't a fight, it was a goddamn explosion. We just laid into them, all instinct, just trying to make them stop, to get them away from the girls, away from us. We didn't stick around to see how badly we hurt them. The second they were both on the ground, we were scrambling into the car. I've never fumbled for my keys so hard in my life. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I finally got the engine to turn over just as the third guy, the one who'd been chasing us, came stumbling out of the woods. His face was a mask of pure fury. I slammed the car into reverse, spitting gravel everywhere, and peeled out of that lot without looking back. The drive home was dead silent. Utterly, terrifyingly silent. We were all just in shock, replaying every detail over and over. The dirty nails, the triangle, the axe, the bag of blood, the smile. We didn't call the cops. What would we even say? That we were high in the woods and found a weird bag and then beat up 2 guys? It sounded insane. We just went home, locked our doors, and didn't talk about it. We tried to forget, but 3 days later, it was on the local news. A report about 2 missing kids from the elementary school a few towns over. A brother and sister. They'd been missing for almost a week. They were last seen playing near the woods by the old quarry. And the little boy, he was 9 years old. #9. It wasn't a word. It was a person. It was a kid. And we held a bag of his blood in our hands. I was maybe 13, 14, and I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. You know how it is at that age. My big thing was conspiracy theories, but not the lame stuff. I was deep into old Cold War-era Russian secrets, specifically their space program. I'd spend hours on my clunky desktop computer, digging through forums, and using weird search engines to find stuff the regular Google results buried. I was obsessed with the lost cosmonauts theory, the idea that the Soviets sent guys up to space before Gagarin who died up there, and the government just erased them from history. One night, fueled by cheap soda and a sense of righteous discovery, I found it, an ancient, barely functioning website with what looked like an old contact email address. It was probably just a dead link on a fan page, but in my head, I'd found a direct line to some forgotten KGB archive. So, I did the dumbest thing I could possibly do. I opened up my email client, and with all the arrogance a teenager can muster, I wrote a message. I used my full real name, my actual name, and I demanded answers. I listed the names of the supposed dead cosmonauts and asked what really happened. I hit send, feeling like a real damn whistleblower, and then I forgot all about it. For a few weeks, anyway. The first weird thing didn't even happen to me directly, which made it all the more unsettling when I heard about it. It came through my little sister. She came home from school one day looking pale, and told my mom and dad this bizarre story. Her friend's mom, a lady we knew from the neighborhood, was walking home from the grocery store when a car pulled up alongside her. She said it was a big, heavy-looking sedan, dark green, the kind you don't see much anymore. The windows were so dark you couldn't see inside. A window rolled down, and 2 men were in there. She said they had really thick, heavy accents. She was pretty sure they were Russian. They didn't smile. They just looked at her, and one of them asked in this broken, gravelly English, "Where does my last name, family live?" Just like that. She was so freaked out she just pointed vaguely down the street and said she didn't know and practically ran home. When my dad heard this, his whole demeanor changed. He wasn't the paranoid type, he was a pretty level-headed guy, but I saw a look in his eyes I'd never seen before. That night, he sat us all down and said very calmly, "I want everyone to keep an eye out for a big, dark green car with tinted windows. If you see it, you don't go near it. You come get me immediately." The very next day I saw it. It was like something out of a movie, so perfect it was almost fake. I was looking out my bedroom window which faced the street, and there it was. Parked about 50 feet down from our driveway, on the opposite side of the road, partially tucked under the shade of an old oak tree. It was exactly as described, a big boat-like sedan, painted a green so dark it was almost black, and the windows were just solid, reflective black squares. You couldn't see a damn thing inside. My heart just dropped into my stomach. It was a cold, heavy feeling. There was no mistaking it. This wasn't a coincidence. That email, that stupid, arrogant email I'd sent, flashed in my mind. It felt like a confession I had screamed into the void, and now the void was sitting outside my house. I just stood there, hidden behind my curtains, watching it. It didn't move. There was no one getting in or out. It was just there, a silent, menacing presence that had been an abstract story just yesterday, but was now a very real, very solid piece of metal and glass pointed directly at my life. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. I was being watched. We were all being watched. That single sighting turned into a 2-week-long nightmare. The car became a part of our daily lives. It wasn't there all the time, which was almost worse. It would just appear. Sometimes in the morning when I was leaving for school. Sometimes in the afternoon when my mom got home from work. Other times, late at night, I'd peek through the blinds and see its silhouette under the orange glow of the streetlight. It was always in the same general area, just far enough away to maintain a sliver of plausible deniability. But we knew. We all knew. The worst part was their reaction whenever we tried to do anything. A couple of times, my dad got fed up and decided he was going to confront them. The second he'd open our front door and take a step outside, the car's engine would roar to life, and it would just peel out, gone down the street before he could even get to the curb. They were watching the house itself, waiting for any sign of approach. It was a game to them, a sick psychological game. The paranoia in our house was suffocating. We stopped answering the door. We kept the curtains drawn. Every creak of the floorboards, every car that drove by a little too slowly, sent a jolt of anxiety through us. My dumb teenage adventure had trapped my entire family in a prison of fear in our own home. The single most terrifying moment of my entire life happened on a Tuesday afternoon during that second week. My parents and sister were all out, and I was home alone. I was in the living room, trying to distract myself with some video game, but I couldn't focus. The house was too quiet, and then I heard it. The low, distinct rumble of that car's engine. That was normal. But this time, it didn't stop down the street. It got louder and louder. My blood ran cold when I realized the sound was coming up our driveway. I froze, controller slipping from my hands. I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel right outside our garage. It stopped. The engine didn't turn off. It was just idling, a deep, throbbing hum that vibrated through the floor. It was right there. They were in our driveway. I was completely paralyzed with fear, crouched behind the sofa, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I was convinced that was it. The door was about to splinter open. They were coming inside for me. I held my breath, listening, waiting for the sound of a car door opening, of footsteps on the porch. But there was nothing. Just the endless, terrifying hum of that engine, right outside my house, for what felt like an eternity. After about 5 minutes, which felt like 5 years, the engine revved once, loud and aggressive, and then I heard the tires squeal as the car reversed at high speed out of the driveway and sped off down the street. I stayed hidden for at least another half an hour, shaking, before I finally got the courage to crawl to the window and peek outside. The street was empty. They were gone, but they might as well have left a crater in our driveway. After that day, we never saw the car again. It just vanished. But the damage was done. For months, my family was on edge. My dad installed extra locks on the doors. My mom jumped at every unexpected noise. My sister had nightmares. And me? I lived with this cold, gnawing guilt in the pit of my stomach. I just knew, that my stupid email had brought that darkness to our doorstep. I never found out who those men were. Were they Russian agents? Government spooks? Mobsters who got the wrong address? I'll never know for sure. But I learned a very real, very hard lesson. Some doors are best left unopened, and some questions are best left unasked, because you might not like the answer when it shows up and parks in your driveway.